Are you a lifelong fan of General Hospital?
Are you a new fan who wants to know more about the history of the show?
Do you enjoy talking about the show with others?
Do you find yourself yelling at the TV?
Is your self-care an hour a day in Port Charles?
If so, we invite you to join hosts
Amanda Kimmel
and Shannon Coach at the place where all the hidden conversations take place and secrets are revealed.
Meet us at Pier 54,
a General Hospital fan podcast.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the Port Charles 411. We are on Lucky Part 47, Lucky and Liz Part 38. And I think that it's important to note when, we still say it's Lucky and Liz, especially right now, it's not even them romantically. They're co-parenting, but there's enough crossover, obviously, with the kids. I feel like it's both of their stories, but eventually at some point when we go back to do Liz, we're not going to be able to just cut this part out and insert it into her story because we leave out a lot of her stuff.
Right.
So it's truly just when Liz and Lucky are interacting. This is from April 4th through June 9th, 2011. Here's the deal. I was getting married in May 2011. I wasn't watching the show. So I forgot, or I didn't know, because I didn't watch, what was happening. I was assuming by this point, based on where we've been going, that we would know, or that Lucky would know, that Aiden's his kid.
Fair assumption.
This is not that episode.
It's not.
It's, and rightfully so, it's the continuing fallout after we ended last week's episode with Lucky finding out and Luke finding out that he's the one who hit and killed Jake. I guess I thought that was shorter because it was an accident and, they had already basically said that it was an accident, that there wasn't going to be criminal charges filed. There wasn't going to be anything like that. So
right.
It was I thought that was more Luke's story on how he dealt with it. And obviously Lucky is not going to be moving on.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realize this is when they really, so it's a lot of Luke, but it's also a lot of Lucky because we saw Lucky go through his addiction, but he's really involved in Luke's.
Yes.
So that's where we are. It was really difficult to keep it just Lucky on this one, but all the little side ones, as in the past, do feed into his storyline.
Right.
But it sometimes seems like it's mostly Luke, but it's not. So we pick up where Dante met Lulu for coffee at Kelly's and tried to help by giving her the number of a support group for families living with alcoholism. And that is Al-Anon. Just in case anyone is curious, Al-Anon is the support group for people that have family members or loved ones that are struggling with alcoholism. Lulu immediately pushed back, saying her father wasn't a drunk. Dante told her about his cousin's drinking, how denial had clouded his judgment until he finally went to a meeting and began to see things differently. Lulu grew defensive, snapped that Dante had no idea what he was talking about, and stormed off. I seriously miss Julie Berman.
Yes.
Lucky found Luke at the Haunted Star pouring vodka and handed him the program from Jake's memorial. Luke had stayed away out of respect for Lucky and Liz, but Lucky dismissed it as another excuse. He accused Luke of avoiding the truth, that his choice to drink and drive had cost Jake his life. Lucky said he needed his father's support that day, only to be abandoned. Luke admitted it had been cowardice and said that he couldn't escape what had happened, though he still refused to call it a blackout. He insisted that he wasn't drunk, only experienced at holding his liquor years after years of practice. Lucky pushed back, admitting he was an alcoholic too, but choosing to face his grief without a bottle, unlike Luke, who numbed himself drink after drink. Their argument grew heated until Lulu walked in and begged them to stop. She said Jake's death had been a tragic accident and that it could have happened to anyone, and denied Luke's drinking was to blame. Lucky said that she was refusing to see the truth. Lulu countered with Luke already felt undeserving of his children after what happened, and she didn't want their family to break apart. Luke insisted he would give his life for Jake if he could, but Lucky told him the only way forward was to acknowledge alcohol's role in the accident. Luke refused, saying he couldn't claim a problem he didn't believe he had, and Lucky walked out. Lulu stayed behind to comfort Luke, assuring him of her love. When she finally left, Luke poured his drink into a planter, but seeing Jake's picture on the program, he filled another glass and drank it as Lucky quietly returned and watched. At his apartment, Lucky told Mac that he was ready to get back to work. Nicholas worried Lucky was burying himself in tasks to avoid the pain, warning that staying busy wouldn't erase his loss. Lucky explained that grief was constant and there would always be an empty place where Jake should have been. He said working was the only way to keep him from sliding into a bottle. Nicholas asked about his sobriety, and Lucky admitted that temptation still called out to him, but he hadn't given in. He reminded Nicholas that despite their arguments, they were brothers and he would always love him. Carly arrived soon after to thank Lucky for persuading Liz to donate Jake's kidney to Jocelyn. She admitted she could never repay him and offered her support if he ever needed it. Lucky apologized for once accusing her of being behind Jake's accident, but Carly brushed it aside. She compared Lucky's feelings to her own guilt when she had thought she was responsible. She reminded him that Luke still loved him and suggested reaching out might help them both. After Carly left, Sonny stopped by. He offered condolences and shared his own anger after Michael was shot, saying he had wanted the shooter to pay with his life. Except for in that case, it was Sonny's fault that
Right.
Michael got shot. This was not Lucky's fault that Luke...
Absolutely not.
It's not like Lucky had been feeding Luke the shots.
Right.
Lucky said that it wasn't an option for him and admitted he had asked Sonny to be there for Luke since he couldn't watch his father drink through the grief. Sonny tried to reassure him that Luke hadn't meant any harm and that Jake could have been lost in any number of ways. But Lucky refused to dismiss the fact that alcohol had been a factor. I agree. At the Haunted Star, Luke dozed off at the bar and dreamt of Jake playing with his toy motorcycle only to wake alone. He shaved, changed, and greeted Ethan, who had just returned from Las Vegas with Maya. Luke encouraged Ethan to enjoy life while he could, though the weight of Jake's death hung heavy between them. Ethan admitted that he had heard about the accident and regretted not being there. Luke told him about how he had been rushing to make it to Lucky's wedding to Siobhan, driving on the dark, potholed Lexington Road. He hadn't seen Jake until Lucky later confronted him with the police report. Luke admitted he had had a couple of drinks that night but denied being impaired, saying maybe it was easier for Lucky to direct his anger at alcohol than to hate him outright. He reflected on how he had lived much of his life cheating death, only this time it was his grandson who had paid the price. Ethan tried to comfort him, but Luke confessed that the thought of it never left him. It's very interesting that Luke is more upset that Lucky is blaming alcohol, and he's willing to essentially forgive Luke.
Right.
But Luke's upset because he's blaming the alcohol. And that is definitely something that, at least in my experience, alcoholics do.
Yes.
At home, Lucky distracted himself with the Brandon murder case while Siobhan came in with groceries. Out of nowhere, he suggested they marry immediately, but she urged him to take time to grieve instead. When she offered a hike, he brushed her off and headed back to work. Over at the Haunted Star, Luke was still drunk and smashing bottles until Nicholas told him to stop running and face his pain. Luke lamented having ever started a family, but Nick countered that Lucky needed him more than ever, and forgiveness had to start with Luke forgiving himself. Nick reminded him that Lucky had once forgiven him for his affair with Liz, so surely there was hope between Lucky and Luke too. Sonny later showed up at the Haunted Star to encourage Luke to reconnect with his son. Once Sonny left, Siobhan dropped by and bluntly told Luke that he needed to quit drinking and face the responsibility for Jake's death. Luke dismissed her worries, insisting he wasn't responsible for Lucky's choices, which drove her to storm out. Lucky, meanwhile, went to see Jason. Jason apologized for missing Jake's memorial, and Lucky admitted he was sorry for what Luke had done. The two fathers shared a moment of mutual regret, though Jason grew frustrated when Lucky turned the visit into business about Brandon's murder. Who's Brandon?
I don't know.
Okay. Oh, look at you not even being friends with me, and you were also not watching while I was getting married.
Yep.
Solidarity. It's not convenient when we did not watch at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know what I was doing then. That was the whole trying for a baby time, but I don't remember what parts I watched and what I didn't watch. And Brandon could have just been not that important because I kind of remember the rest of this. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Elsewhere, Lulu confided in Dante about a dream where she had accused Luke of loving alcohol more than life. She explained the dream was the opposite of her true feelings, and she wasn't angry, only sad for him. Dante reminded her that feelings weren't always neat and reassured her. That night, Luke doused the Haunted Star in gasoline and toyed with a lighter until Lucky appeared. Instead of panicking, Lucky challenged him, saying blowing up Ethan's workplace and Tracy's investment would only hurt others and simplify Luke's living in the wrong way. He reminded his father that burning down the Blues Club years earlier had solved nothing, and this wouldn't either. Luke paused, thoughtful, after Lucky left. This goes back to your thing. Who cleans up all the gas? I think you talked about that
Right.
when Charlie's blew up. It's like, okay, who cleans this up?
Mm-hmm.
Lucky then revisited Jason, weighed down by guilt. He admitted he should have stopped Luke from drinking, noting the bitter irony that Jake had been conceived during his own addiction and died because of Luke's.
Oh.
Jason told him not to shoulder the blame, insisting Lucky had been a good father. Later, Lucky went to Lulu, who revealed Luke had put away the lighter and cleaned up the star. Oh, good. Luke cleaned up the star.
Yeah.
Though he was still lost in pain. Lucky said he knew what Luke's plan was, drink until he no longer felt. Lulu turned to Maxie for support, but Maxie warned her not to push Liz and Lucky back together, arguing that grief wouldn't fix old wounds. Maxie admitted her own messy past with Lucky, but doubled down that Liz wasn't right for him, though she felt guilty for once wishing Liz harm. Back at the loft, Lulu worried to Dante that the things between Lucky and Luke were worse than ever, and Lucky wanted to cut ties completely. Dante sympathized, noting how difficult family struggles could be. Liz, meanwhile, sat with Aiden's paternity test when Nicholas arrived. She confessed she was struggling to understand how to keep going after Jake's death, but knew her boys and Lucky still needed her. She blamed herself for Jake's accident, but Nicholas assured her she wasn't at fault. He admitted Lucky had battled temptation to drink again, but he insisted he didn't want to lose his brother, not after all they've been through.
I'm glad that Nicholas wanted to be there and everything, but I don't think that him telling Luke, oh, she forgave me, or Lucky forgave me for hooking up with his ex-wife. It's fine. He'll find a way to forgive you for running down his son. Like, those are not the same
Right,
thing.
not the same thing.
In
No.
any way.
No, not even close. It wouldn't even be the same if it was hit a dog versus hit a kid.
Right.
Like, very,
Right.
very, very different things.
Exactly. So let's not compare the two, Nicholas, because that's not
No.
what we're going for.
They're not the same level of forgiveness.
No. Liz was carrying her own weight of guilt. She threw herself back into work, telling Steve it was the only way to stay upright. But he suggested she take the boys to Sarah in California. Liz refused. She wasn't ready to leave, not until she sorted things out with Lucky. When she went to see him, she told him she was hanging on by a thread, but holding steady for the sake of her kids. Lucky told her she had nothing to be sorry for, though he couldn't stop blaming himself for not stepping in with Luke. They were both on the same side of grief, but couldn't quite find their way to each other. At the same time, the truth about Aiden's paternity added another layer of complication. Maxie happened to find the test results confirming Lucky as Aiden's father, and it threw her completely. She didn't know what to do with the knowledge, and for once, Maxie didn't run straight to gossip. She actually tried to shield Lucky from it. She told Liz she needed to come clean, but also admitted the timing was terrible. Liz hesitated, terrified that revealing the truth would blow up the fragile peace between Lucky and Nicholas, who had only just begun repairing their relationship. Maxie, though, couldn't shake the feeling that the secret was going to come out whether Liz was ready or not. Nicholas, for his part, was trying to step up for Liz and Lucky, reminding Liz she wasn't to blame for Jake and promising he didn't want to lose his brother again. But Maxie knew, carrying the truth around in her back pocket, that everything between the brothers was hanging by a thread. She even confided to Matt how she felt torn. Part of her wanted to protect Lucky, another part wanted to protect Liz, and yet she knew if she stayed silent too long, she'd end up hurting both. Siobhan made sure Lucky didn't disappear into his grief. She brought him groceries, cooked meals, and tidied up the apartment so when he didn't have the energy. She nudged him to get out of the apartment, taking him for walks or drives, insisting that moving around would help him. Lucky resisted at first, but she stayed patient, teasing him lightly and reminding him that hiding from life wouldn't honor Jake. One afternoon, she led him up to the roof, pointing out the view and telling him to take it in. She talked about living with regret versus taking chances, and for the first time in weeks, Lucky laughed. The weight he'd been carrying lifted just enough to let him breathe, and he looked at her differently, noticing how steady she had been through everything. As the city spread out below them, Siobhan reached out and Lucky leaned in. Their lips met in a long, quiet kiss, a moment that felt like a small spark of life returning amid all the grief. It didn't fix everything, but it reminded them both that there was still a future to fight for. Maxie called Matt to her apartment, needing advice about the secret she thought Liz should reveal. She didn't share the details, but admitted that keeping it was eating at her. Matt praised her restraint and told her to trust her instincts and stay silent, saying it wasn't her place to decide for anyone else. At Lucky's apartment, a kiss with Siobhan quickly turned tense when her purse hit the floor and a plane ticket slipped out. Lucky realized she planned to return to Ireland without telling him. Siobhan argued that he had enough on his plate with Luke's drinking and Liz's lingering guilt over Jake's death, so she thought it best to make a clean break. Lucky insisted that it was his choice whether he could handle a marriage and reminded her that he cared about her and wanted her in his life. Siobhan admitted that she had been avoiding saying goodbye because she feared he would persuade her to stay. Lucky smiled, knowing he had. Meanwhile, confiding in Nicholas about the latest paternity results, revealing that Lucky was Aiden's father, Nicholas understood why she hesitated and reassured her that he didn't need the results to know that Aiden was a gift for all of them to heal. They agreed on honesty and mutual support while acknowledging that no one could fully understand what Lucky and Liz had been through. Liz reminded Nicholas that she had never stopped loving Lucky, and he assured her that they would always be friends. Lucky ran into Maxie at Kelly's, and she hinted that something good was about to happen in his life, reminding him that the universe sometimes balances losses with unexpected rewards. Maxie reflected on her own grief after her sister's death and how Spinelli had reminded her how to laugh again, which she used to encourage Lucky to see the brighter side. When Liz arrived, she worried that Maxie might have spilled the Aiden secret, but Maxie left to give them privacy. Lucky and Liz spoke about Siobhan. He didn't want her to leave, and he was seriously considering a green card marriage to keep her in the country. Liz admitted guilt over Jake's death, but encouraged Lucky to follow his heart if marrying Siobhan would make him happy, emphasizing that she wanted his happiness above all. Siobhan went to check on Luke, who was drinking heavily on the Haunted Star. She urged him to step up and repair his relationship with Lucky rather than disappear into alcohol. Nicholas arrived afterwards and encouraged Luke to stop being selfish and think about the people who needed him. Later, Luke confronted Jason at his penthouse, lashing out over parental anger and past mistakes. Sonny showed up at the Haunted Star to keep Luke from escalating further and pointed out the danger of his empty gun, helping prevent a potentially deadly confrontation. Maxie pushed Liz to tell Lucky the truth about Aiden, arguing that Lucky deserved to know and that Liz might be able to make him happier than Siobhan could. Liz hesitated, worried about upsetting her friendship with Nicholas and interfering in Lucky's life, but Maxie reminded her that letting Lucky slip away would be the worst outcome. Meanwhile, Sam warned Lucky that Luke was trying to provoke Jason, who was already on edge. Lucky planned to intervene to prevent a confrontation, asking Sam to help manage the situation without alerting Jason. He acknowledged Luke's drinking problem and his own role in trying to help, even if it meant facing danger or awkward truths connected and working towards resolution. At the Haunted Star, Sonny tried to persuade Luke to reconsider his suicidal plans, but Luke insisted that it wasn't Sonny's choice to make. They argued over guilt and responsibility, with Luke convinced that justice required his own punishment for Jake's death, while Sonny reminded him that dwelling on the past wouldn't bring closure. Luke admitted that he loved his children, but he felt he had no right to forgive himself and even wanted to provoke Jason as a way to atone. Sonny warned that such actions would only hurt Lucky and the rest of the family, trying to get through to him while Luke remained determined to carry his pain alone. Lucky was consumed with worry over his father. He confessed that he had always seen Luke as larger than life, making it hard to reconcile the man he loved with the man spiraling into guilt and alcohol. Lucky acknowledged that Luke's drinking had contributed to the tragedy, but insisted the choices Luke made were his own. Sonny shared memories of seeing Lucky and Luke together, highlighting the deep bond they shared and the heavy burden Luke carried. Lucky recognized that his father was in free fall and decided he couldn't wait any longer to act. Nicholas joined Lucky, and together they began planning a family intervention to get Luke into rehab before it was too late. Lucky warned that if Luke refused help, they might have to cut ties permanently, emphasizing the urgency of the situation. As the family debated how to proceed, Luke quietly packed a bag, poured a drink, and left his office, taking his passport, money, and other valuables. Tracy and Nicholas discovered his disappearance and realized that Luke had vanished, confirming that the intervention would need to happen without delay. Back at Lucky's apartment, Lulu and Ethan arrived to discuss the plan. Lucky explained that Luke was in danger and needed immediate help. Lulu resisted, convinced Luke would simply shut down or flee if confronted, while Ethan feared the intervention could backfire. Lucky pressed that Luke had hit rock bottom and that inaction could cost him his life. Tracy and Nicholas later arrived to support the plan, but Lulu stormed out, unwilling to participate, and Ethan left unsure if the intervention would succeed, though he trusted Lucky's instincts. Later, Lulu confronted Luke at his office, struggling with the realization that he had a drinking problem and that Jake's death might have been influenced by it. Tracy urged her to face the truth and help him, explaining that acknowledging Luke's alcoholism didn't diminish their love for him. Lulu admitted that accepting the situation was painful, but she understood that helping Luke required honesty, even if it meant facing uncomfortable realities. Meanwhile, Ethan met with Christina at Kelly's to process the situation. He admitted that he doubted the intervention would succeed, but he trusted Lucky's judgment and didn't want to lose his father. Ethan reflected on the bond he shared with Luke, their shared humor and jaded perspective on life, and acknowledged the depth of his love for him. When Lucky called Ethan, it set the stage for the next steps in gathering the family and attempting to pull Luke back from the edge before grief, guilt, and alcohol consumed him completely. Liz found Luke standing on the spot where Jake had been hit, and their conversation quickly turned to guilt and responsibility. Luke admitted that the last time he had been on that road, he had hit Jake and driven on without feeling anything. Though the weight of the tragedy had caught up with him now, Liz reassured him that it had been an accident and urged him to see Lucky, reminding him that his son was worried. Luke doubted Lucky wanted to see him, feeling like a reminder of Jake's death, but Liz pleaded with him not to let Lucky lose his father too. They spoke about Lucky's upcoming marriage to Siobhan and how he had asked for Liz's blessing. Liz explained that she was trying to convince herself to be okay with it, while Luke cautioned that Lucky wouldn't be able to move forward until Liz did. He also noted that he couldn't judge Liz for her past choices, but he believed a fresh start apart from each other might be what Lucky and Liz needed. After wishing her luck, Luke left. Later, Luke went to Jake's and invited Siobhan to join him. Though she usually didn't drink while working, she agreed, and they spent time talking about travel and adventure. Luke shared a memory of taking young Lucky to Istanbul, where Lucky had navigated the city on his own while Luke anxiously waited in the rain. And Siobhan shared her desire to live without regrets after seeing so many people, including her father, weighed down by them. Their conversation touched on loneliness, connection, and the balance between cynicism and experience, with Luke calling himself a romantic who had seen the world. Siobhan used the time to call Lucky and let him know that Luke was drinking at Jake's and reminiscing. She continued to drink with Luke to keep him occupied until Lucky arrived. Ethan eventually joined, helping serve drinks while Luke began to slur and drift off. Lucky arrived just as Luke's head hit the bar, marking the start of what he jokingly called a Spencer intervention. Luke later woke up duct taped to a chair in Sonny's warehouse, surrounded by family and friends. The room included Carly, Sonny, Tracy, Nicholas, Lulu, Lucky, and Ethan, all seated in a circle. Luke demanded to know how he had ended up there, quickly remembering the drink at Jake's. Lucky offered to untie him if he agreed to listen, but Luke refused to cooperate, leaving him secure while the group prepared to stage an intervention to address his drinking and the guilt that had been consuming him.
Luke was frustrated that no one had approached him individually before the intervention. Yeah, they did.
Exactly.
Just a few times. And Calvin Blaine, a professional interventionist, explained that he was there to guide the family through the process. Luke insisted he wasn't an alcoholic and dismissed the idea of an intervention, but Calvin reminded him to at least listen. Each family member took turns reading letters, starting with Lulu, who expressed her love and gratitude for her father while acknowledging his absence had affected her childhood. As she spoke, memories of moments spent with Luke played out, including a conversation outside a clinic when she had faced a difficult decision, and Luke had supported her choice. Lulu urged him to get help, admitting she needed her father in her life. Ethan followed, sharing how meeting Luke and discovering he was his father had been life-changing. He admitted he'd only recently recognized that alcohol had begun to control Luke. Luke lashed out, but Sonny stepped in, reflecting on the admiration he always held for Luke as both a friend and a father figure, recalling adventures with Lucky and how those moments had inspired him. Nicholas spoke next, recalling how Luke had saved his life and had been a steady presence during a terrifying experience, highlighting the man that Luke had always been before alcohol started taking over. Carly confronted Luke about his drinking, explaining that it had kept him from being present when it mattered, and that she loved him but feared losing him if he didn't get help. Tracy followed, reflecting on their marriage and the love they had developed despite struggles with alcohol, admitting her own role as an enabler while urging Luke to accept treatment. Luke remained resistant, insisting he hadn't been an alcoholic and rejecting the idea that he had a disease. When it was Lucky's turn, he called Luke his hero, crediting him with teaching him how to survive and shaping him into the man he had become. Lucky acknowledged his own struggles with addiction while urging his father to face the truth, not for him, but to help Lucky process the loss of Jake. Memories of father-son moments flashed on the wall, showing their bond and Luke's pride in Lucky. Lucky pleaded with Luke to reclaim the wisdom and guidance he had once provided, highlighting the urgency of family support in such a painful time. Calvin explained that arrangements had been made for an inpatient treatment at Shady Brook, and Lucky, Ethan, and Lulu were ready to drive Luke there. Luke refused, shocked at the idea of entering a facility. Calvin clarified that the choice was ultimately Luke's, but there would be consequences if he didn't go. Nicholas would close his doors, Sonny would step back, and Carly warned that he wouldn't be welcome at the Metro Court or have access to its comforts. The intervention made it clear that Luke's family was committed to saving him, even if he struggled to accept the help. Ethan, Tracy, Lulu, and Lucky made it clear to Luke that if he refused treatment, he would lose access to the haunted star, be cut off from the family, and be excluded from their personal lives. But Luke remained steadfast, insisting that alcohol wasn't the problem and he was still the same man. Does he know that he is saying that he is the man that would intentionally hit a child then, even by accident?
Right, exactly.
And I know that intentional and accident are opposites, but you know what I meant there, that he would rather be known as someone who could accidentally, soberly hit a child.
Mm-hmm.
He left the warehouse defiantly, claiming that everyone could pat themselves on the back for trying, but that they had written him off as an unrepentant jerk. We use the word jerk. Who had killed a 4-year-old. Outside, he tried to charm Tracy into a honeymoon, but she refused to be swayed and insisted that rehab was non-negotiable. Lulu wrestled with her feelings, hoping her father would take responsibility, but refused to allow him back into her life until he agreed to seek help. While Dante encouraged her to focus on other things, like attending a Yankees game, to distract from the stress of Luke's defiance. Luke appeared unexpectedly smug about his inside man at the Haunted Star, confident that Ethan would eventually come around as well, and reminding Lulu of his belief that she, like Ethan, would forgive him in time. Luke consulted Alexis about legal strategies to reclaim the Haunted Star, pursuing palimony or alimony, and secure visitation with Ethan and Lulu. And this would have been before Alexis's own struggles with alcohol. He positioned himself as the wrong party, insisting that the family had overstepped by trying to fix him after Jake's death, and that Lucky had projected his grief onto him by blaming alcohol. Luke admitted to having a drink the night of the accident, but maintained that he hadn't been drunk and refused to accept a problem he didn't believe he had. When Tracy arrived, Luke announced the lawsuit and emphasized his defiance, demonstrating how far he was willing to assert control over his life and assets. Meanwhile, Lucky and Nicholas worked to address Siobhan's immigration problems, discovering her visa extension had been denied. Lucky remained confident that Nicholas could find a solution, but Siobhan worried, sensing the possibility that marriage might still be necessary to stay together. To lift Lucky's spirits, Siobhan planned a surprise reminiscent of their time in Ireland, taking him to a quaint cabin where they could focus on each other and temporarily escape the stress of visas, family tensions, and Luke's ongoing struggles. She confessed her wish that they could stay in the moment together forever, while Lucky reassured her that things would work out, trusting in Nicholas's influence in Washington. See, we just need Drew going to talk to Nicholas.
Yes.
When Nicholas returned with the news that the visa effort had failed, Siobhan began packing, though Lucky reminded her that marriage was still an option, showing his determination to find a way forward despite the obstacles. At the hospital, Liz adjusted to being back at work while continuing to navigate her grief over Jake's death. She and Lulu reflected on the lasting impact of the tragedy and Luke's involvement, with Liz reminding Lulu that accidents happen and she wasn't to blame for the events that led to Jake's death. Liz processed her feelings of guilt, replaying moments in her mind and admitting to missing Jake's presence, his crooked smile, and the way he would bury his head in her neck. She reconciled with the reality that she had given Jake a good life, even if imperfect, taking comfort in Jason's reassurances and guidance. Liz also contemplated how things might have been different if she had told Jason the truth about Jake earlier, ultimately acknowledging that hindsight would only drive her crazy and that she had made the best choices she could. When Liz learned that Lucky was getting married, she rushed to the elevator with the paternity test in hand.
Jason returned to Sam's hospital room and told her he had run into Liz. He admitted Liz was in pretty rough shape and had still taken the time to wish Sam luck on her surgery. Sam told him he was welcome to talk to Liz if he thought it might help them process their grief over losing Jake. Jake confessed that he couldn't understand how Liz managed to live in the house where Jake had grown up, walk past his bedroom every day, and look out the window at the place where their son had died. He said it would have driven him crazy. At Lucky's apartment, Siobhan admitted she didn't think they should get married because Lucky wasn't in the right frame of mind to make such a life-altering decision while grieving Jake and worrying about Luke. Lucky assured her he knew what he was doing, then turned to Nicholas for support. Nicholas agreed with Siobhan, but Lucky was determined to marry her. Siobhan resented Lucky speaking for her and suspected her insistence stemmed from feeling powerless in other areas of his life. She argued that marriage wasn't the answer. Lucky explained he wasn't ready for her to leave and asked her to trust him. Nicholas suggested traveling around the world to stay together and resolve her visa issues, even offering to pay for it. But Lucky declined, worried that running away from his problems would make him more like Luke. He also didn't want to leave Cameron behind so soon after Jake's death. That's a valid point.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, please don't leave your other kid right after their brother passed away. Like, come on. Lucky asked if Siobhan was ready to return to Ireland. She said no, and Lucky smiled, asking her to stay with him. He promised that marriage to him wouldn't be so bad, and Siobhan admitted she feared it would be really good. She reminded him they weren't marrying for traditional reasons, but worried he might regret it. Lucky told her to stop trying to protect him from himself. A text came in offering Lucky a work shift, and he left it to Siobhan to decide whether he should go or marry her. After a moment, she agreed. Siobhan emerged from the bedroom in a beautiful white dress, disappointed that Nicholas had left, meaning Lucky wouldn't have his brother by his side. Lucky reassured her the unconventional wedding suited them, wished her a happy wedding day, kissed her, and held the door open for her. Later, at the Justice of the Peace, Nicholas appeared unexpectedly. He admitted he still had reservations about the marriage, but wanted to support his brother. Lucky and Siobhan were surprised when Nicholas produced the wedding rings they had forgotten to pick up. They exchanged vows quietly with laughter and small smiles before returning to Lucky's apartment for a private celebration. Back at Kelly's, Tracy laughed at Luke's lawsuit while Luke insisted being locked out of the Haunted Star caused him great emotional distress. Tracy accused him of being insane and reminded him she owned the casino. Alexis argued a case could be made that Luke had been under duress when he signed ownership over. Luke claimed he had been kidnapped, and Tracy suggested he needed to face the consequences of his addiction. Luke vowed to make Tracy sorry, but she told him he wasn't strong enough to self-destruct fully and urged him to get help before his drinking consumed him. Lulu arrives at the Haunted Star to find Ethan preparing the casino for the evening. Ethan wondered if they had done the right thing turning their back on Luke. Lulu insisted Luke had a problem and was in denial, while Ethan questioned whether there was another way to help him. She admitted she might have thought differently if Luke had asked for help earlier, but a recent encounter at Kelly's, where Luke appeared drunk and ranting, had changed her mind. She said it was both sad and embarrassing to see him like that. Lulu explained that alcoholics often had to hit rock bottom to accept help, while Ethan admitted he hadn't wanted to admit Luke needed it because he had been living like him. He acknowledged that Luke's hedonistic lifestyle had appealed to him. Lulu understood Ethan's reluctance, and he promised he wanted to help Luke, but not by cutting him off. Alexis later arrived to explain Luke's lawsuit and try to assess whether she would represent him. Lulu suggested Luke was trying to deflect attention to continue drinking, insisting she knew he was an alcoholic. Later, Ethan was removing chairs when Luke entered, greeted him, and went straight to the bar. He set two glasses and grabbed a bottle of scotch, asking Ethan, "So, drink?" Ethan challenged Luke to prove that he could stop whenever he wanted, worrying about the potential danger after Luke had doused the casino with gasoline. Yes, that would definitely be concerning. Luke argued that Lucky needed to believe he had a drinking problem so Jake's death could be blamed on alcohol, not him. He referenced his abusive father, saying he knew a drunk when he saw one, and admitted he had been lashing out because he couldn't face the fact that he had killed a child. As he poured another drink, Lulu walked in and demanded he go to rehab, accusing Ethan of enabling him and warning him that he would feel guilty if anything happened to their father. Meanwhile, Liz received a birthday gift for Jake from Lucky, a small toy motorcycle. She was distraught, but Lucky apologized for forgetting to cancel it. Liz was understanding, and they consoled each other quietly. Unaware Liz was there, Siobhan entered in her wedding night lingerie. Embarrassed and apologizing to Liz, Liz quickly excused herself, leaving them alone. Lucky apologized to Siobhan for letting family matters interfere with their time together, but Siobhan said she didn't mind. She sliced the wedding cake, using it as Jake's birthday cake, and encouraged Lucky to share some memories. As they laughed and remembered Jake, Liz returned with the toy motorcycle. She handed it back to Lucky, who thanked her, explaining that he wanted to keep the memory but didn't need the toy. Siobhan, still in her wedding dress, was surprised but accepted the moment, understanding it was part of honoring Jake. They shared quiet smiles, talked softly about their son, enjoyed a gentle balance between remembering Jake and celebrating their wedding together. That's weird that he would even get married on that day, though. Like, really, you wouldn't push it back a day?
Yeah.
Siobhan
Very.
Right.
Sorry.
Siobhan went to see Liz, and they both apologized to each other. Siobhan worried that Liz had been shocked to find out she and Lucky had married, but Liz said she had already known, having stood outside the Justice of the Peace. She explained that she had heard something in Lucky's voice that told her he wasn't marrying for a green card. He cared about Siobhan. Liz admitted it hurt to hear the vows, but she understood that Siobhan offered Lucky something he needed, and she wouldn't take that from him. She went to the kitchen to get cookies, leaving Siobhan to sit and pick up a photo from the coffee table. Underneath was a lab letter, and Siobhan read that Aiden was Lucky's son. Lucky caught up with Jason at GH, reflecting on Jake. He said thinking about Jake reminded him painfully that every moment he had with his son had been at great cost to Jason, and he regretted that his father had caused Jake's death. Jason assured him he didn't blame Lucky. Lucky said the hardest part about death was that life kept moving, wondering if he had disrespected Jake by marrying on his birthday. Jason told him it was a way to remember him. Lucky said honoring Jake meant continuing to live and trying to be good to each other, though Jason admitted he wasn't ready and Lucky agreed he wasn't either. At the hospital, Lucky thanked Jason for listening as he talked about Jake. Jason said it wasn't a problem and that Lucky had been a great father to Jake, which made Jason feel lucky that he had gotten to know his son through Lucky. Lucky shifted the conversation to Luke, explaining the intervention and that Luke had refused rehab. He said Luke was drinking to drown in guilt and that he tried to prevent Jason from reacting violently towards him. Jason admitted he was tempted, but with Michael watching, he couldn't afford a mistake. Lucky said he was doing his best to help Luke, but needed more time. At Maxie's apartment, Maxie worried she might have to act if Liz kept a secret from her friend, but Matt distracted her with wine. At Liz's house, Siobhan read the paternity results.
Distraction.
Right?
Sorry.
At Liz's house, Siobhan read the paternity results before Liz returned from the kitchen. She asked why Liz hadn't told Lucky. Liz apologized, acknowledging it had been difficult on Siobhan and promising she didn't judge her. Siobhan didn't understand at first until Liz acknowledged that she had a right to be upset for having interrupted their wedding night. Liz admitted she hadn't accepted that Lucky cared about Siobhan until she heard his vows, but reassured Siobhan that she supported their marriage. Siobhan thanked her and excused herself. A short time later, Lucky stopped by to check on Liz, realizing she might have been surprised by the wedding. Liz told him he didn't have to explain anything. Their conversation turned to Jake's birthday. Liz said Jake would have loved the motorcycle Lucky had brought, and Lucky assured her that Cameron remained a priority and his marriage wouldn't change that. Sensing Liz was troubled, Lucky invited her to speak. Liz admitted she had something to tell him, glancing at the paternity results, but couldn't bring herself to reveal that Aiden was his son. She confessed she had known about the wedding beforehand, having learned of it when she called the police station and stood outside the justice of the peace, hearing Lucky's vows. Lucky felt bad about the timing, but Liz said she only wanted him to be happy. She added that moving forward was hard because she missed Jake whenever she saw one of his toys. Lucky shared that he also faced painful reminders of Jake, like finding a Christmas card Jake had made for him. Liz smiled, then mentioned that Siobhan had stopped by to explain the wedding and apologize. Liz appreciated the gesture and noted that it showed Siobhan genuinely cared about Lucky, which made her happy. Later, Lucky arrived home to find Siobhan waiting. She had something important to tell him about Liz.
I wonder what it could be.
I don't know.
At Kelly's, Luke poured whiskey into his coffee just as Carly walked in, and she wasn't amused by his usual banter. She said she needed a distraction and wanted to check on him, curious if he'd tried sobriety. Luke scoffed, insisting he wasn't an alcoholic, and dismissed the warnings from what he called a group of hypocrites. He then reminded Carly that helping her with Jax had cost him 7 diamonds, and he expected a suite at the Metro Court with all the perks, claiming it would help him win Tracy back. Carly didn't understand how that would work, but Luke explained that Tracy wanted him dependent on her, and if he wasn't, she'd try to reel him back in. Carly agreed, but told him he first had to go to rehab, which prompted Luke to call her the B word and pour more whiskey into his coffee. At the apartment, Siobhan struggled to bring up Aiden's paternity. Lucky sensed it was about Liz and learned that Siobhan had gone to Liz's to explain the wedding and apologize. Lucky knew Liz had appreciated the gesture and gone to the Justice of the Peace for closure. Lucky felt reassured that Liz supported their marriage and wanted him to be happy. Siobhan asked if he would have stayed with Liz if Aiden had been his son. Lucky pointed out that Aiden was Nicholas's child and reminded her that while the tragedy had brought him closer to Liz, it didn't mean reconciliation was possible. He reflected on the years spent trying to make Liz central in his life, the hurt they caused each other, and how meeting Siobhan had unexpectedly pulled him out of that. He acknowledged the life he had with friends and 2 children, and how Siobhan's presence was grounding. Siobhan smiled, saying she only knew the Lucky in front of her, not the one full of regret. They returned to celebrating their wedding night, kissed, and made love. Afterwards, Lucky got dressed and left while Siobhan quietly watched. Later, Lucky ran into Luke on the piers. Luke was surprised by Lucky's greeting and expressed that he missed him. Lucky hoped it was enough to push Luke towards rehab and explained he stopped to check on him because he was concerned about Luke doing something reckless. Luke bristled at the suggestion of being suicidal, but Lucky reminded him of the past dangerous actions, including dousing himself with gasoline and provoking Jason. Luke argued about who was responsible for Jake's death, and Lucky suggested that the next time Luke felt suicidal, he think of Lulu and Tracy. Lucky hoped Luke would get help and turn his life around. Outside Kelly's, Siobhan warned Lucky that immigration wanted to question them about their marriage. They quizzed each other on possible questions, laughing over small details like Lucky's favorite sandwich, bologna on rye, introduced to him by Luke. Lucky reflected on memories of his father and the regret of cutting Luke out of his life, but noted that rehab offered hope. He admitted that the bright spot in his life was their marriage. His phone rang. Liz was calling because Cam was worried that mom is sick. At the Weber house, Liz was trying to keep Cam on track with his bedtime routine when he bolted outside. She panicked but found him in the side yard, brought him inside, and sent him to his room and broke down in tears, unaware that Cam had heard. Lucky arrived and Liz explained the situation. Lucky reassured her that her reaction was understandable, and together they checked on Cam. Liz thanked Lucky for being such a great father and confided that Cam missed Jake, so Lucky promised extra attention. She wanted to hold it together for Cam, and Lucky encouraged her to call him if she needed support, though Liz hesitated, not wanting to interfere with his new marriage. Lucky reminded her that living without Jake was hard for everyone and suggested they take it one day at a time, hugging her before they joined Cam. So then there was all this stuff going on with Johnny and Anthony Zakara still. Johnny returned home to find Anthony waiting, demanding to know where he had been. Johnny refused to answer, and Anthony reminisced about Claudia, calling her treacherous but acknowledged she had a spine. Johnny warned his father to stop speaking about Claudia, but Anthony pressed on, claiming Johnny wouldn't have anything without him. Johnny asserted he had run the organization his way and told Anthony to stick to gardening. Anthony suggested Johnny would need to get more aggressive to bring Michael to their side. Lucky arrived to make sure that Anthony understood his parole terms. Anthony acted confused, but Lucky didn't buy it and reminded him that unlike Luke, Anthony hadn't killed a child while drunk. Lucky grabbed Anthony and threatened to drag him back to jail if he ever spoke of Jake again. Anthony tried to act frightened, but continued goading Lucky, leading Lucky to punch him. Johnny apologized, but reminded Lucky to contact their attorney next time. Lucky left frustrated, and Johnny scolded his father for tormenting Lucky, although Anthony laughed, admitting he knew how to push Lucky's buttons. Later, Lucky met Luke on the piers, and he told his father about the incident with Anthony, and Luke admitted he was proud Lucky had stood up for himself, but worried Lucky had let Anthony provoke him. They discussed the intervention, and Lucky warned Luke that alcohol would eventually win. Lucky admitted he respected Luke for sticking to his guns, which is why he had to limit contact. On the piers, Jason and Carly met to discuss Jocelyn's custody. Carly worried about Jack's manipulating the situation, and Jason reminded her to stay calm and use leverage strategically. Luke appeared, taunting Jason about Jake and claiming that Lucky had raised Jake instead. Jason remained restrained, and Carly tried to intervene. Luke mocked Jason's role as a father and punched him when he refused to engage. Carly defended Jason while Luke accused him of hypocrisy. Jason finally voiced he had failed Jake, but Luke continued to provoke, suggesting Jason hadn't felt real grief. Carly snapped at Luke, calling him a pathetic jerk. Insert expletive here. While Jason refused to give Luke what he wanted, permission to punish himself. Meanwhile, Ethan and Christina talked at Kelly's about Luke's alcoholism. Ethan regretted participating in the intervention and worried Luke might hit rock bottom before accepting help. Christina shared concerns about Lisa Niles giving her hydrocodone pills, which Ethan confiscated, warning Christina not to let Lisa back in Patrick and Robin's house. Lucky later arrived, noticed a pillow on the ground, and after struggling with temptation, destroyed it in coffee, reassuring Christina that he was good just for today. Then Alexis stopped by Jason's penthouse with a care package for Sam. Jason explained that Sam was asleep but promised he'd deliver it. Alexis took a moment to express her sympathy for Jake's death and acknowledged Jason's sacrifices. She clarified that she respected his choice to give up Jake to keep him safe, recognizing that Jason had spared Jake from the dangers of Sunny's world. Jason admitted despite his intentions, he'd missed out on his son's life, but Alexis appreciated that he had put Jake first. She also wondered whether Sam and Jason might become parents if Sam's surgery succeeded, noting that Jason's past decisions about Jake could influence any future children. At Lucky's apartment, Lulu worried that Luke's intervention had backfired, leaving Luke further out of control. Lucky reminded her that only Luke could choose rehab and it would take time. Lulu wanted a more hands-on approach, but Lucky feared they'd just enable Luke. He stressed that cutting off contact was an act of tough love, necessary to protect both Luke and Lucky's own sobriety. While Lulu wanted to approach Luke with care and love, Lucky insisted he couldn't participate because being around Luke made staying sober too difficult. At the nurse's station, Liz mistook Nicholas for someone else, calling him by Jake's name. She apologized, noting that was once a funny habit, only now reminded her of her loss. Nicholas suggested a vacation to give her a break, but Liz declined, insisting she needed to stay busy with work and the boys to cope. Later at Kelly's, Nicholas had Aiden with him, and Lucky joined them. They reminisced about Jake at Aiden's age, and Lucky teased Nicholas about mixing classical music with rock and roll for the little one. The conversation highlighted how far the brothers had come, able to talk about their children and past tensions with a sense of ease. Back at Lucky's apartment, Ethan stopped by to discuss Luke. He admitted that he had misjudged the situation, apologizing for not supporting Lucky's effort to get Luke into treatment. Ethan confessed that reaching out to Luke had been a mistake and that while he'd hoped his friendship could help Luke confront his drinking, it hadn't worked. Luke had admitted wanting absolution, signaling he needed help, and Ethan was determined to support him, though he also understood why Lucky had to step back to safeguard his own sobriety. Luke called Lucky, asking him to gather the Spencers for a family meeting at the Haunted Star. Lucky arrived with Ethan, worried that Luke might be planning a dramatic farewell before leaving town. At the casino, Luke smashed shot glasses with a baseball bat in a drunken display. Dante showed up after a complaint about the disturbance. Do you know how loud he'd have to be if someone's complaining about a disturbance on the Haunted Star in the harbor?
Right. I was just going to say that. Like, what exactly was he smashing? Because just some shot glasses ain't making that noise.
No. Luke dared Dante to arrest him, but Dante refused, insisting Luke needed help. Luke argued he liked being down here and criticized Lulu for joining what he called the Dad's an Alcoholic group. Dante urged him to get help for Lulu's sake, but Luke dismissed him and continued drinking and destroying barware. Lulu later found Luke in the casino drinking heavily. She tried to stop him from causing more damage, but he lashed out, sending her fleeing in tears. Realizing his actions, Luke briefly broke down. Tracy later spoke with Lulu, who promised to clean up Luke's mess despite Tracy's insisting it wasn't her responsibility. Sunny arrived at the casino, noting that Lulu was neglecting herself out of concern for Luke, though Luke insisted he was fine. Eventually, Luke gathered Ethan, Lucky, Lulu, Nicholas, and Tracy to apologize and admitted that he had treated everyone poorly. He announced he would check into rehab the next morning, a plan Lucky suggested could start sooner. Meanwhile, at Lucky's apartment, Maxie confronted Siobhan, warning her not to get all wifey around Lucky when talking to Liz. Siobhan realized Maxie was referring to Aiden being Lucky's son. Maxie doubted Liz would have told Siobhan without talking to Lucky first and pressed Siobhan on whether she had been spying or working with Helena. Siobhan explained she had discovered the information by accident and promised not to share it. By the way, watch this. She did not discover it by accident. It was folded up in an envelope on the coffee table.
Right. When I go over to people's houses, I don't open their mail, even if it's right in front of me. And even if it's already open, I don't pull it out and look at it.
It was already open, and it was under a picture of Jake. So, it was when she had gone over. Well, we just read that. When she had gone over to talk to Liz, the morning after the wedding, she sat down and picked up a picture of Jake, and the envelope was there, but it was facing the other way too. So she had to really look at it to see that it was from some laboratory or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I could almost slightly understand if it was the night that Cam said mom is sick or something's wrong with mom, whatever it was that he had just said. And then she saw the envelope and she's like, okay, is there something that Liz isn't telling us?
Right. That would make sense.
But not just, hi, sorry I married your ex. Oh, hey, can I look at your mail? Thanks. Anyway, Maxie insisted that Lucky needed to hear about Aiden from someone who truly cared about him and warned Siobhan to stay out of it, reminding her it wasn't her business.
I'm not sure how it's not her business, considering she's his wife.
We need to do a recap of Liz and Maxie together, because I'm trying to figure out at what point did they get to where they are now? Well,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. In Maxie's apartment, she tried reaching Lucky, but only got his voicemail. She left a message and debated calling back when Christina showed up unexpectedly. Christina apologized, but Maxie reassured her it was fine. Christina had actually stopped her from doing something she might regret. Christina needed fashion advice for an event, so Maxie led her into her bedroom to sort through the closet, offering her options and helping Christina narrow down choices. At the Haunted Star, Luke resisted going to rehab, insisting he didn't see the need to rush. Tracy offered to drive him, but Luke bristled at being treated like a child. Lucky tried to pull him aside for a private conversation, but Lulu objected. Eventually, Tracy persuaded Lulu to leave with Nicholas following. While Ethan stayed behind to support Luke, Luke admitted it hurt that no one trusted him, and Lucky reminded him that addiction breaks trust because addicts lie even to themselves. Luke initially rejected Lucky's lecture, saying he'd heard it all before, but Lucky pressed on, calling him out for planning a secret goodbye instead of facing responsibility. The conversation quickly became heated, with Lucky accusing Luke of cowardice and confronting him about his treatment of Lulu. Luke lashed out, physically shouting Lucky had no idea what it was like to be him, to grow up with Tim Spencer as a father. But after a moment, Luke realized Lucky had been right. He had become his own father in some ways. He admitted the weight of killing Jake, how he had always prided himself on having no regrets, and now that had changed. He promised to take responsibility for what he'd done and reassured Lucky that he would always love him. Lucky returned the sentiment, and the tension between them softened as Luke picked up his phone to call Tracy. Tracy arranged for Luke to enter a 30-day inpatient treatment at Shady Brook, explaining to Lulu that tough love was necessary for him to accept responsibility. Luke called Tracy, ready to go immediately, and at Shady Brook, he confronted the damage he caused his children. He and Tracy shared a moment of reconciliation, affirming their love and support as he began treatment. Nicholas and Lulu reflected on Luke's commitment, with Lulu acknowledging his alcoholism and feeling cautiously hopeful that he would follow through with rehab. Back at home, Lucky found Siobhan and opened up about his fears. He told her Luke had agreed to go to rehab, but he worried that he had pushed his father too hard. Lucky shared his own experience with addiction and rehab, how he had been scared straight after his struggle with pills, and the way his anger had affected Liz during her pregnancy. He admitted he pushed Luke in a similar way, hoping it would snap him into action, but now he feared it might have been too much. The possibility of Luke walking out of treatment haunted him more than anything. Lulu confided her own fears about Luke, worrying that sobriety might change him and that he wouldn't be the same dad she knew. She hadn't realized the depth of his drinking problem until Jake's death and feared the emotional distance that would come with recovery. Tracy and Lulu discussed how Lucky had changed after rehab, how he had grown more serious, focused on work, family, and sobriety, and worried Luke might follow a similar path. Tracy reassured Lulu that sobriety would become part of Luke's life without taking away who he was, and the love and connection within the family could survive the changes as long as Luke remained committed. Lulu remembered her father always smelled like cigars, soap, and scotch when he hugged her, and admitted that she would miss it. She worried Luke might come out of rehab as a completely different man and wondered if Tracy thought he'd be able to rebuild his life. Tracy wasn't sure, but knew the burden of killing Jake would stay with him forever. Their conversation drifted to the night of the accident, and Lulu pressed Dante for his professional opinion. Reluctantly, he confirmed that Luke's drinking likely contributed, which made Lulu face the truth she had long avoided. The same man who had let her down as a child had killed Jake. Lulu accused Tracy of pushing Luke out of their lives with 12-step rhetoric, arguing that it had worked for Lucky but only pushed Luke further away. Ethan warned that Luke might never return to Port Charles, noting that Lucky's grief and the family rejection after Jake's death had created an impossible environment. Meanwhile, Maya texted Ethan about delaying family business in Philadelphia, adding that she missed him, which added another layer of distraction to everyone's already tense lives. At the Haunted Star, Dante cautioned Lulu against buying the boat impulsively, suggesting she make the decision for the right reasons. Lulu admitted her motivation was to give Luke a place to return to restore a sense of home. Lucky arrived unexpectedly and clashed with her, warning that the Haunted Star wasn't the place for someone struggling with alcoholism. Dante defended Lulu, saying that she could grieve in her own way, while Lucky insisted she was feeding her father's denial. Lulu pressed Lucky to set aside his anger and focus on convincing Luke to come home, blaming Lucky for pushing Luke away with his tough love approach. Their argument turned into a battle of perspectives, Lucky insisting he was trying to save Luke from his drinking, while Lulu argued that his accusations had only made Luke punish himself. She claimed Lucky's obsession had driven Luke away, and in frustration, she poured herself double shots of scotch, drinking them as Lucky watched silently. Dante later approached Jason, asking him to speak to Lucky and help reconcile him with Luke. Jason struggled with that idea, and Luke's drinking and arrogance had contributed to Jake's death, but also recognizing that he couldn't hold on to his own arrogance while criticizing Luke. Back at the Haunted Star, Dante found Lulu still drinking, blaming herself for the family tension and worrying she'd lost Lucky. He comforted her, encouraging patience, and joined her for a single toast, not to the family's demise, but to their relationship and his support. They slow danced, giving Lulu a moment of tenderness amid the chaos. In Lucky's apartment, he admitted to Siobhan that he doubted Luke would stay in rehab. "So what? Who put me in charge of my father's sobriety anyway?" he asked. Siobhan reminded him that in a way the whole family had. Lucky clarified that they expected him to help Luke, not drive him away, and decided he needed to fix the damage by tracking his father down alone at first. Siobhan argued it was too risky for him to go alone, insisting she would follow him with or without his approval. Lucky warned her it could be dangerous, but Siobhan reminded him that they were a team. He finally agreed to let her come along, though he had no clue where to start. When she asked where a lost person went, Lucky answered simply, "Home," realizing he might know where Luke had gone, and began making arrangements to leave town. Before they could go, Lulu and Dante Oh, before they could go, like before they could leave the appointment or apartment. I thought they meant like go, like leave the country. And I'm like, how did they get there that fast?
Right.
Before they could go, Lulu and Dante knocked. Lulu apologized for blaming Lucky for Luke leaving and for drinking in front of him. She admitted she had no right to judge Lucky because of how much he loved their father. Lucky acknowledged she was right. He had driven Luke away, but he was determined to make things right. Lulu brightened when Lucky hinted he had a lead on Luke's whereabouts, though she insisted she hadn't goaded him into it. Lucky reassured her and added that, contrary to her suspicion, Lucky didn't love him more than he loved Lulu. Or Luke didn't love him more than he loved Lulu. Lucky promised to prioritize Lulu's needs and get Luke to come home, though he warned that Luke might not be receptive. Lulu trusted Lucky to say exactly what Luke needed to hear, while Dante observed with concern. Back at the casino, Lulu focused on getting the Haunted Star ready for Luke's return, confident that seeing the place restored would give him something to look forward to. Dante worried that she was being too optimistic, but Lulu insisted she could have it running within the week. Meanwhile, Lucky and Siobhan boarded a plane. Siobhan noted that Lucky's involvement had lifted a heavy burden from Lulu, and Lucky confessed his fear that her emotional enmeshment with Luke could lead to self-destruct alongside him. He reminded Siobhan she could still back out, but she refused, wanting to stick with him through the search. It's bringing back all the memories. I do remember watching some of this of Lulu was just like way too daddy's girl in this moment and trying to make everything perfect for Luke again. And it was like very annoying to watch and not scream at your TV. How did she not realize that she was just continuing to enable him?
Because she was young. She was in her 20s. And
yeah,
if you can make things perfect for the person to come back, maybe they will choose not to drink.
Yes. I mean, it was very realistic, but I just remember being frustrated, as we've talked about, both of us dealing with alcoholism in our families before. Though their conversation turned to Luke's past, Siobhan asked how such a free spirit like Luke had raised someone so grounded as Lucky. Lucky explained that responsibility had never been Luke's strong suit. His freedom had ended only when Laura brought her dream house, forced him to settle in Port Charles. Siobhan reassured Lucky that they would find his father, but he warned that Luke was determined, and if he wanted to destroy himself, nothing could stop him. Siobhan just hoped Luke wouldn't drag Lucky down with him.
See what I mean? That it was tough. Like, we couldn't really skip over this because it plays so much into his own storyline.
Yeah. No, definitely. We needed to see the comparison between his addiction and Luke's addiction, and to see how many other people were aware that Lucky was Aiden's father before Lucky got to learn about it.
Well, there's that too. Because the thing is that they keep saying, and we hear it now, Lucky has such a need for adventure and, he's so much like Luke and all this. And I don't know, I'm not seeing it, I mean, I see the addiction part, but the way that they handle it, the way that they, Lucky confronts the problem.
We talked about that before whenever they started writing Lucky like this, that we didn't like it because that's not how we know Lucky. Siobhan just said it. You're not like your dad, even though you have some of his characteristics. You're not just running off, haphazardly, doing whatever makes you happy, leaving people behind. So for them to suddenly be like, I don't know, maybe it's like a midlife crisis or something that Lucky's going through that
he's not. Well, when they started doing that, it wasn't midlife yet.
I know. Maybe it's an early midlife crisis. I don't know. But yeah, definitely wasn't where he was.
No, it was not. I mean, they like to do a lot of rewrites.
We should be getting Aiden back soon because they were talking this week about how it's Labor Day. So that means school should be starting back for them soon.
Yep.
So
let's see. Let's see if Aiden comes back this week.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to be part of Monday's recap, but we'll see.
Right.
So join us on Monday as we recap this week's episodes.
Have a good weekend.
And we'll meet you at the pier.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, we invite you to go to pier54podcast.com to subscribe on your favorite platform. Don't forget to leave us a review.
And you can also follow us on many social media channels. Just search for Peer 54 Podcast. Also, we are not perfect, so if there is something that we missed or messed up, just let us know by emailing us at peer54podcast@gmail.com.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.